happiness in your career can be a fluctuating variable. The definition of career success takes on a new life for all of us, but particularly for women in midlife. Raising children, nurturing relationships, and finding time for self-care are all things women have to consider on top of their professional ambition. According to my friends over at the Wall Street Journal, they report there's about a 5% disparity in satisfaction when it comes to American and international jobs. For men, the rate of satisfaction stands at 65%, and for women, it's an even 60%. The largest gaps in satisfaction between men and women were largely related to financial benefits, such as wages, benefits, and bonuses. Meanwhile, according to the 2022 AARP Global Employment Survey, it revealed that nearly half of workers who are 45 or older were hoping to change careers within the next 3 years. Furthermore, according to my friends over at Forbes, workers between the ages of 45 and 64 constitute 41% of today's workforce, which is up from 29% in the 1990s. So the data clearly tells us that today's midlife worker, particularly women, want to have some flexibility in their career and personal ambitions. This is good news for my friend Wendy Alexander. She's a career coach who helps middle-aged women unlock their midlife career success. She has proven strategies for menopausal women to land their dream jobs. Even if they're going through a career transition, she has an inspirational and inspiring story herself. She fled the apartheid in South Africa and an abusive relationship which saw all of her bank accounts being drained, and she rebuilt her life because she was inspired by her daughter. And Alexander joined me this week to talk more about helping women achieve career success in midlife, what she is most thankful for in her own right, and how we can continue to make the corporate world value diversity and inclusion in their hiring practices. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. I'll take a minute to welcome you to the program, and I'm super excited to learn how you help women and other career professionals navigate their career in midlife. Great to see you this afternoon, and thank you so very much for being here.
Oh, it's an absolute pleasure. I look forward to the chat.
Absolutely, and I know that your claim to fame or career passion is helping women navigate their midlife career choices and navigate their mid-career to help them find their dream job. So I'd love to hear all about the good work that you do and what makes you so fabulous, my friend.
Okay. So, look, it starts with a personal journey. Where I got into career coaching was really out of what I call the rock bottom mess of my own life. So I was in a relationship for almost 10 years. That went sour. I was pregnant at the time and he left. So I was about to go on maternity leave and become a single parent. And we sold the house. It sold at a loss. And he walked away from everything and left me with a big debt. So there was crazy panic because it was like, I'm about to go on maternity leave, which means my income is going to start drying up. I'm going to have a newborn on my hands. And how do I get myself out of this mess? So I did go on maternity leave. And then through that whole time that I had off, a few months I had off, I had the recognition that I needed to make more money. And in my head, I did the sums. I needed to make an extra $20,000 a year. And so when I came back off maternity leave, which was a lot sooner than I wanted to, but I had to because it was only me supporting myself and my daughter, I started to approach recruiters and hiring people, and really started to pick their brains for help, because I was like, I need to land a job that's going to give me at least $20,000 more a year. And so there's a lot of fear, there was a lot of panic, but the thing that helped me through the fear and the panic was to take actions. And the actions that I took was go and find out from the people that do the hiring what they need to see on my resumes, how I need to present myself to land a better paying job. And that's what I did. The very little money that I had left at the end of each month, I would save money and I would use it to take these people out for coffee. And I would pick their brains and ask them questions on how to present myself as a candidate so I could increase my prospects. At the same time, I've also been a writer. I love words. I've been a wordsmith, a writer since I was really young, exploring all kinds of different writing, creative writing, business copywriting, all of those things. And I started to write and rewrite my resume over and over and over and started to test it out in the market. And so alongside with the reframing of the resume and the help and the insights that the recruiters and the hiring people gave me that I was working with at the time, I created like a framework or a system and tested it, keep sending it out, and then started to notice I was getting bites. And this started happening probably 6 to 8 months after I started that whole process of research and picking people's brains. And then within that time, probably 6, 8 months later, I landed a role that jumped my income by $50,000. So I exceeded my mark of $20,000 a year and increased my income by $50,000. And then that was really the start of the journey, because my colleagues, my family, my friends who saw the rock bottom that I came from and how I launched into this better paying job started to come for help. And that's where the business started. I actually started to work with people. Now, I was in corporate. I landed this great job in corporate and continued to grow for another 20 years. But alongside the corporate role, I also was working this side little hustle of mine, which was helping other people elevate in their careers and get better incomes and land better jobs. I mean, that's pretty much how I built the whole career, the framework and the business. And then when I hit midlife, which was, and particularly menopause, I went through a difficult time. So menopause symptoms for me was very difficult. And I found the stress of corporate wasn't helping that journey at all. And so I left corporate. And now I do what I do, career coaching, business copywriting, resume writing, LinkedIn profile writing, all of those things. Now that's my full-time job. So that's
Yeah,
how it started for me.
yeah, absolutely. And Wendy, I'm curious to ask you about your how you define the sort of concept in terms of competitive resilience based on their own personal and professional stories. So, how do you think you define competitive resilience?
Look, I think so. The first thing that I help people do when they come to me is to get into the nuts and bolts of their own story. So I think so many people undervalue themselves. I've seen that everywhere. People do things automatically. They have natural gifts and talents. Some people are great leaders. Some people are great collaborators. Some people walk into a room and can sense moods of people and how it needs to be uplifted and how things need to be changed, for example. But they do it so automatically because it's a part of their personality, their natural personality. They don't always see the value in that, and they don't, more importantly, know how to package that up and sell that as a valuable commodity for someone else, to someone else. And so that's where people get discouraged and think that there isn't an opportunity for them to change. And when people get discouraged, they lose resilience. And so then other people who have got that confidence, who do sometimes see the value, and some people don't even necessarily have the concrete value. They've just built muscles of confidence. They've practiced, they've gone and spoken to people that have succeeded. And they learn these tactics and techniques, and then they start applying it. And that's where they become more competitively resilient than the ones who sit in a mode or a mood of, but I don't know where to start, or I'm not good enough, or my skills and talents, nobody's going to want that. But the truth is that we all have transferable skills. And so if someone, for example, was working in banking and suddenly decided, I'm interested in working in information technology, for example, they've got transferable skills, skills like leadership skills, like problem solving skills, like team collaboration skills. What they need to do is then frame that up in a way that is beneficial to another company. And so those are the kinds of things that I help people do, because not everybody loves words the way I do. I'm a wordsmith. I've been writing stories since I was 6 years old, through difficult times growing up in South Africa in apartheid. That's where I started writing. And so I've always had this love of words, but not everybody is good with that or even likes that. And so sometimes people need to find the people that can do what they don't necessarily like doing to help them elevate themselves and build their competitive edge.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, you come from a background as a corporate hiring manager. So I'm curious to get your insights on how you think the corporate world has changed, and what do you think people need to know as secrets to success if they want to succeed in the corporate world today? What are hiring managers looking for today, in your view?
So what I'm seeing at the moment, I think, 10, 15, maybe even 20 years ago, people sort of would send out a resume and it would be filled with their duties and their responsibilities. The corporate world has changed now. It is very much about how you can contribute. So where the focus has gone is on your achievements. And so corporate, for example, no longer wants to see resumes that's filled with tasks and responsibilities. You might give a 1 or 2 sentence little highlight of the core functions of the role, but then you need to zone in on how you've succeeded. And one of the ways you can start to frame up the achievements that you can offer them is to ask yourself a very simple question, which is, what did I make better? in the role. So if you walked into the role and you noticed the process wasn't working, for example, or you noticed the team working there was flailing, they were struggling, and you put in mechanisms to improve things, those are the types of things that people want to see. How did you improve in the role, or where did you uplift people, or what particular tasks did you do that maybe generated more revenue for the company, and so on. And so the big focus for corporate hiring people at the moment is achievements. And then the other thing that they really want to see you highlight is your EQ skills, so emotional intelligence skills, which is all about how you get things done by working with other people, showing awareness of the people you work with and the goals of the company, and then moving people towards achieving those goals. So those don't necessarily require job-specific skills. You may need some kind of technology skills in certain areas, but that requires skills like leadership skills, team building skills, collaboration skills. So those are all EQ skills and self-awareness skills. And a lot of people miss that. They end up zoning in on their documents, whether it's on their resume or on their LinkedIn, or when they do a cover letter to apply for a job. They zone in on all the job-specific or tech kind of skills. But corporates are now looking for EQ skills because they want to see how you work with people and how you lead people, especially post the pandemic, because, people were shell-shocked with isolation, all the things that happened around the pandemic. And so a lot of corporates are finding that people need that leadership. They need people that can help people elevate, that can help people bring them out of that whole isolation mode, because some people are still struggling with that, even though it's a few years on, right? And so that's where I see corporate has changed, and where people need to now start aligning to some of the demands from corporate in terms of, this is what I want to see on your resume, on your LinkedIn profile, to satisfy my requirements as a corporate. At the end of the day, the question to ask is, what can I contribute? What value can I add? And how you demonstrate that is to zone in on the achievements that you've had in your previous roles.
Yeah, absolutely. And Wendy, I'm also curious to ask you about working with women who are looking to make a career transition midlife. I know that's a passion for you, and I'm curious, how do you help women aspire to both career and personal excellence, where they can land fulfilling roles and ultimately marry their career happiness with personal success? What are your thoughts there?
Okay, so with midlife women, there's obviously, can be a challenging time for a lot of women, because we do go through menopause. And that's where I've seen a lot of women, when they come to me at that midlife stage, it's often they're about to enter that menopausal stage, or they are already in that stage. And for a lot of us, there are certain things that are happening to the body. We're losing estrogen. We suffer from brain fog. We get insomnia, go through, sometimes anxiety levels elevate during that time. Those were certainly my symptoms. And some of the women that I've worked with have experienced the same. And women tend to become quite discontented through that time. That is the time that I've noticed where women start going, what about me? Because prior to that, they're raising the kids, they're managing the household, and they're trying to establish their careers. So they've got a lot on their plate. And usually, I suppose because we're reasonably good multitaskers, we can cope with that. But then suddenly you hit this midlife stage, your body's changing, it's going through hormonal changes, which is affecting lots of areas of your body. And women become discontented, and they start to ask that question, well, what about me? I actually want a career that's successful, but I also want personal peace. I want rest. I want to be able to thrive in my personal life alongside in my career space. And so a couple of things that I recommend is obviously, first of all, get the health side of things managed, like go and get the support that you need through that journey, because so many of us, we have this, women in particular, we tend to suppress lots of stuff. So when things are going on, we just keep pushing through. We kind of socially trained to do that. But this is the time where you need to go and get the support and the help that you need. So, for me, certainly one of the things I did was I went and found the healthcare professionals that could support me. And some of them were natural healthcare professionals. I even went to counselors and psychological healthcare professionals to help me with the anxiety levels that were starting to rise for me during midlife. So manage the health side first, because if you can't manage that, then you can't focus, you can't create proper plans to achieve the goals and the success to change the career. So the health and the brain in particular, that foggy brain that we often get, needs to be managed. And then one of the things that I do with women, and I do it with midlife men as well, but mostly with women, because women tend to struggle more with digging into the values of their story. So I actually have a process which is on my website, and it's a free resource, and I call it Mining Your Story. And this process is all about going through the patterns of your life, the achievements, the things you've overcome, because within those frameworks are the gold nuggets of what you can contribute. So if you've someone that's overcome something, you've got some kind of mechanism that you've used to overcome various things. Or if you have something that people come to you for advice for, you're naturally good at offering advice in certain areas, that could be something that could be framed up as a gold nugget that you sell to a company. And so I go through a process first with women of digging into the mining your story, because I see that that's where we start to tap into their value. And then we start working on how they can position that. So uplifting the resumes is really important. But then before uplifting the resumes and the documents, I work with women to identify their dream companies, right? What is your dream company? Okay, you might be working at a bank, for example, but really your dream company could be a non-profit, helping migrant women or helping children or doing something in that space. You've done the corporate, you might want to, at this stage, start shifting into a different space. So what we then do is we identify the dream companies, and then we start identifying the strongest transferable skills from your past corporate and existing corporate that you can then take into the new industry. And then we start framing up the resume, the documents to align with that, brand you very strongly on LinkedIn, because here's one of the tips that I want to give people. LinkedIn is so underutilized by so many professionals, but it is a networking platform, and it is where networking is where all the juicy hidden jobs occur. So a lot of people prefer to offer really great roles to people that they trust. So it's the word of mouth referral. And so that's why networking is so important, but people shy away from it. They don't tend to want to do it. They want to hide away from it. And yet that is where you're likely to get your juicy prime roles that's going to suit you. And so I teach people, particularly women, how to network in the space and how to network on LinkedIn. Because in my day, 20-something years ago, I had to go to all these industry meetups. So you had to turn up in person. You had to talk to people in person. And sometimes if you're an introvert, it's kind of really difficult to get that conversation going. Now there's a whole online platform that you can do it on. And that platform is LinkedIn, and it's incredibly underutilized. And so I really try and help people, particularly women, get really good at networking on LinkedIn so they can start to build the networks, because I have seen over and over through the 20 years that I've been career coaching people that LinkedIn has just risen and that's where people ultimately get the kind of roles that they want.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
those are some of the tactics.
Yeah, absolutely. And Wendy, I also wanted to ask you about personal character and building personal character. As you mentioned, you survived the apartheid in South Africa and a relationship that wasn't the greatest, and your bank accounts were depleted. So I'm curious, how did those experiences help to build your personal and professional character? What do you take from those experiences that you still carry with you today, my friend?
Okay, so apartheid was obviously a very difficult thing. I'm a woman of color, I know I'm a light-skinned woman, but I am a woman of color. I am in South Africa. You kind of, back in those days, in apartheid times, you defined as white, colored, which is what I am, and black. That was what would appear on your birth certificate, depending on the gene pool. So obviously I have white grandparents and I have black grandparents. So I was defined as colored, and within apartheid system growing up, apartheid came into being in 1948 and pretty much went for till 1994, till Nelson Mandela was freed and became the president of the country. So during that time, you lived in segregated neighborhoods, you lived a segregated life. We, coloreds and blacks, were not allowed to go into white neighborhoods. You're not allowed to go on trains. The trains were segregated, the beaches were everything was segregated. It was kind of like the civil rights movement during the 60s and so on in America, in the South. So it was a very difficult environment to grow up in. We always knew that opportunity was limited, right? Because it was very clear that all the great opportunities went to the white population, and the rest of us had to scramble and struggle to find our opportunities. So my father taught me from very young to value education and to work hard. Those were instilled, Dad pretty much said, look, you're in a country where things are stacked against you. So you're going to have to shape up, you're going to have to be dedicated to your studies, and you're going to have to probably work twice as hard to get even half of the opportunities you might want. So I've been through numerous incidents of racial bigotry, and it does have an impact. It did have an impact. It was damaging in many ways to my self-esteem. We migrated as a family to Australia when I was 21 years old. So I spent the first years of my childhood, my teen, and my early young adult years in South Africa, and then came to Australia. And I believe that part of that attracted the disastrous relationship, because when your self-esteem is not great and you're doubting yourself and you have, I suppose, low self-worth, you don't necessarily attract the best in terms of friendships, in the terms of relationships. And certainly in the term of the relationship, I didn't attract the best man. The relationship lasted for 10 years, but it was quite a volatile relationship. There was infidelity in the relationship. And in the end, when it broke up, there was a violent end. I was pregnant. He became violent. I almost lost the baby. And so I kind of added more emotional scars onto the ones that were already there. But it was interesting. And I always say that my daughter, in many ways, saved me. It was during that time when that relationship ended, and I was pregnant. I was 4 months pregnant when the relationship ended, that I obviously realized, I was like, my life is an absolute mess. So I went to seek help. So this is where I had the recognition. And it was at the beach one day, walking and crying my eyes out because I'd hit the rock bottom, lost the house, had $50,000 worth of debt on my shoulders, was about to have a baby. And what I remember thinking, sitting at the beach, crying, feeling quite despondent, was, okay, what are you going to do about this? Are you going to let this break you, or are you going to let this make you? And I decided, and I guess because intuitively I had this intuition that I was carrying a girl, and then when I'd gone through that violent incident with my partner and I ended up in hospital, they did the scans, and the nurse said at the time to me, do you want to know the sex of the baby? And I just split it out. It's a girl, isn't it? And she said, yes. And I don't know, knowing that I was carrying a daughter, at the beach, I just sat there and I thought, you know what? I don't want this for my daughter. I don't want my daughter to grow up feeling lost, alone, struggling. And so I was like, I have to change this. I have to become my own savior. I couldn't look to anyone else to do it because I was going to be her only parent. He had walked away, and I had to be the role model. And it was something, I suppose, what I struggled to do for myself up until that moment, I knew I had to do for my child. And that was the start of the change for me. That was when, during that time, when I was, going through the pregnancy and then had the baby, was when I was like, I have to change my life. And one of the first things, as I said, was I had to get a better job. But I also put myself into psychological care. I went to see a psychologist, counselor, and started to work on the issues, work on my self-esteem, on the self-worth issues that I had at the time, parallel to then rewriting the resumes and working with the recruiter. So there was a lot of personal and professional development that happened during that time. Every spare cent that I had, I invested in personal and professional development. I stopped going to the movies, and I was a movie lover. I stopped all of the things that were what I suppose at the time I perceived as luxuries in my life, right? Going out for dinners, coffees, spending money on clothes. I stopped all of those things, and I saved the money, and I started to invest it in personal and professional development. And that is how I turned my life around. I knew that no one else could do it, because even when I was getting the help from the counselors, I still had to implement all the strategies that they gave me. And this is the thing with career coaching or any kind of coaching. You go and you get the support and the guidance and the expertise, but then you, the person that has to be responsible for implementing what you taught, what you learn. Because without implementation, nothing changes. And that's what I realized I had to do. So, but to answer your question, honestly, it was my daughter, the arrival of my daughter, and wanting to be a great mother to her and an example of a strong woman that really pushed me forward. She was the motivating factor.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point, Wendy, I'm wondering how you believe people can turn their challenges into opportunities, because I'm a firm believer that internal motivation is a great driver that determines success. And if we don't invest in ourselves, even after we find challenges in our life, it's hard to advance. So I'm curious to ask you your thoughts on how do you think we can turn challenges into opportunities?
So look, I think that we can't avoid challenges in life, right? It happens to all of us in various ways, and sometimes it can be as early as childhood, where your first challenge happens. Some kids have a great childhood, and then they encounter their first major challenge when they're a teenager or when they're a young adult. There is no avoiding challenge. How you respond to a challenge is going to determine your level of success, and then taking advantage of opportunities. Because when someone is challenged, if you adopt for example, a victim mode is what I call it, or a victim mentality. You're going to run that thought process through your head over and over and over. And what I've seen happen, and it certainly happened with me, because I'm not saying I never had that mentality. I certainly did, especially when I went through that rock bottom. The fear that gripped me, and running that fear over and over in my head, for a while, it paralyzed me. I was unable to get into action about anything. And all I did was cry. And all I did was feel sorry for myself. And all I did was blame him and blame life. But as I said, that moment came when I had this intuition that I was carrying a daughter, and then the nurse confirmed it. And something in me, I don't know, it kind of, there was like a slight warrior spirit, the tiny bit of warrior spirit that was still left in me, just said, no, you're not going to become a victim of life, because sitting in victim mode paralyzes you and you cannot take action. So what I encourage people to do is, one of the ways to turn a challenge into an opportunity or into a triumph is to go and seek help. Now, sometimes help can be going to a parent, or help can be going to a friend or a colleague, but go and find someone that you can talk to. A lot of the time, help means you've got to go find a coach. And why I say that is because coaches are not necessarily as connected to you as a parent or a friend or a colleague, right? So sometimes what I've seen is parent, friend, colleague don't always give you the truth that you need at the time. They kind of try and soften certain blows for you. And so what that ends up doing is keeping you stuck in a victim mentality. But when you go to a coach, their job is to be truthful with you, gently truthful, but truthful with you, and to give you strategies to get into action mode, to come out of that fear pattern or that victim pattern and actually start taking action. And good coaches won't overwhelm you with big action steps. They'll give you little action steps to take, that ones that you can take and get small wins. Because as you get small wins, you start to build your confidence. The more you build your confidence, the better you're able to present yourself for opportunities. Because someone who's sitting in fear, or is sitting in a blaming mentality, or sitting in a victim mentality, you will not come across to someone, say there's a business person or a company that has an opportunity, you can't come across to them as confident, as strong, as someone they want to invest time and money in. But when you start working towards getting over the challenge, taking tiny action steps to come through the challenge, getting the help that you need, you start to build the confidence. And at the end of the day, quiet confidence, because I'm not talking about arrogant confidence, I'm talking about quiet confidence, is saleable. People are drawn to it. They want to work with that type of person. And that's how you end up putting yourself in front of opportunities. It does come back to you. I don't think any of us can overcome any challenge and turn it into an opportunity without doing some serious self-reflection and then taking the steps that we need to do to better ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And Wendy, I'm going to share a personal a story about myself, because I'm interested in your answer to this question. So Wendy, I was born with what's called spastic quadriplegia cerebral palsy. Simply means that I don't have enough oxygen to walk normally. And outside of hosting this podcast, I talk to businesses about the importance of integrating folks with disabilities into the workforce. And I'm curious, from your perspective, how do you think the corporate world can better integrate and take advantages of the skills and abilities of folks with disabilities?
Well, look, I first of all, I think that they haven't done enough. And I know this from even working in corporate myself and still being very strongly connected to corporate, because a lot of the people I work with are still going into corporate jobs. And I think it's similar to the same thing that I've been advocating for midlife women, because we often treat it like we over emotional, because we do get anxious. Things are happening to our bodies, for example. And so I see that as a barrier sometimes in corporate, where people with disabilities, midlife women, we not necessarily valued for the skills that we have, or even for the challenges that we've overcome. And it all goes back to education. So one of the ways I think that corporate can start being even more inclusive is by running specific programs to educate, especially educate leadership teams, because the leadership teams are the ones that end up being the decision makers, right? Whether if someone's going to create an inclusion program, it comes back to leaderships. The C-suite usually are the ones that make the final decisions. And so one of the ways that I think that they can get better at it is to certainly run education programs and to start looking at some of the skills that a diverse bunch of people offer, right? You don't get all of your innovation from people who fit the mold, so to speak, the usual mold. Because if you look at someone with a disability, or you look at a midlife woman who's gone through extreme anxiety, and they've managed to continue to grow, to do the things that they've always wanted to do, there's a level of resilience in that person alone that can be an example to the other staff. And so for that reason alone, it is worth considering opening up more and more avenues, because people learn often by example. They learn better by seeing, right? Most people. You can tell, you can speak with your mouth and you can say words, but it's the doing that really lands things for people. And so if I see someone, or corporate sees people with disabilities, and the person is still operating and doing and contributing, well, for me, that's an amazing example of resilience. And what is one of the key characteristics that most corporates want to build in their team? It's the characteristic of resilience. You have an example right there. And so I really think that education, focusing on resilience and turning to examples of people who have been challenged and severely challenged as examples of resilience. It's a great way to exhibit that in corporate.
Yeah, absolutely. Wendy, I also wanted to get your thoughts on the concept of career reinvention. When you have to change directions in careers, sometimes it can be scary and unsettling, but it can also be exhilarating at the same time. So let's dive into the concept of career reinvention, and how do you think women specifically can do it effectively?
Okay, so career reinvention is often about someone getting to that point, and that can be men and women getting to a point, because I have seen mid-level or midlife men who have been big corporate guys for a long time get to the point where they say, I need a change in direction, and I'm not happy doing what I'm doing. So career reinvention comes when people become discontented with the current career. Sometimes they don't know where to start. So it goes back to identifying, first of all, the ideal job. What is your ideal job? What does that look like? And make the effort to actually write it down. I encourage people to journal, and to journal freely, because when you freestyle journal, you don't allow yourself to become limited by restrictions or limiting beliefs that says, oh, but I can't do that. It's like, I'm not going to care about whether I can or can't do that. I'm just going to write down what it is that I really want to do. Once you've done that exercise, the next exercise is to identify what your ideal company looks like. Or if you want to create a business yourself, what does your ideal business look like? And you've got to consider many factors. How does it impact on your health, on your family life, and on your financial life? And then you go through a process of identifying what the gaps are in skills. Because sometimes you might decide, okay, I want to go from banking into healthcare. There may be some skills missing. And so you need to decide, do I want to go into completely transform into, for example, if I was a banker and I now suddenly want to become a nurse or a doctor, because I like to nurture people through health issues, well, you know that you're going to have to go and do some level of education. But you can also go, hang on a minute, I don't necessarily want to go through all that education again at this stage of life, but I might want to go into healthcare in a different way where there's less skills required. So then you go and you look at, there's so much free training on places like YouTube, but also if you have a LinkedIn Premium membership, all of the learning on LinkedIn is covered under that membership, right? So then you close the gaps wherever there are skill gaps. And then you need to, as I said before, you've got to then start to reframe your whole saleable commodities, which is now you're going to start reframing the resume, the LinkedIn cover letters. If you do that, even can create negotiation and presentation packs to highlight your key skills. And so career reinvention can't occur without getting fairly clear about what it is you really want to do, where it is that you really want to do that, and what are the skills gaps that you need to close to be able to then move into the next space. There is effort required, and that's where a coach comes in really handy to help you move in that direction. For some people, career reinvention can simply mean they've been stuck in the same role in a particular company for a long time, missed out on many promotions, and they're wondering how they start landing the better promotions. It's a similar process. You've got to work out what's missing in your skills gap, whether it's in the soft skills or in the hard skills, which are job specific or tech skills, and start to close those gaps. Because people don't give opportunities if you haven't taken certain measures to demonstrate that you really are about growing and learning. Comes back to growth and learning. If you're someone that's closed off to growth within yourself and learning, you're not going to be able to make the changes that you need to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And Wendy, I'm curious to also ask you about pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone when you're going down this career path, and whether you believe there's validation or validity to the fact of pushing yourself out of your career comfort zone of convenience to experience success. What are your thoughts there?
Well, I think if we want to expand in anything, and that applies to career, it applies to finances, it applies to health and well-being, all of those big things in our lives, we have to push ourselves out of the comfort zone, because growth and expansion and change doesn't happen in the comfort zones, right? When we're comfortable, we're kind of sitting. Like if you're making your six-figure income and you're comfortable, you may not necessarily be happy, but you're comfortable. Or if you want health and well-being, but you don't decide to exercise regularly, move regularly, eat well regularly, well, then you stay stuck in the comfort zone and you stay with the ill health. Similarly with the career, if you don't decide these are the action steps that I need to take now, I don't really, like for me, to be truthfully honest, as a writer, I have a rather introverted personality. I like to be in my little cave writing. That's the personality. But when I was going through that really bad time, I knew I needed to make more money. So what did I do? I stepped out of the comfort zone of the person that likes to hibernate with a notebook and a pen or with a keyboard and started to talk to people. And it was incredibly uncomfortable to do that, to go and approach hiring people, approach recruiters and say to them, I want to know how I can improve myself as a candidate applying for better paying jobs. What are the main steps that I need to do? It was incredibly uncomfortable to do that because my natural tendency is the hideaway in the den kind of personality, writing my little stories, writing my little documents. And so being in front of people and actually going to ask them for the help and picking their brains was incredibly uncomfortable. But it was the best thing that I did for myself because I learned so much. And so many of these people were incredibly generous. Because here's the other thing. People will always step forward to help people who want to help themselves. Always. I've never seen, look, there are probably a handful of stingy people in the world, but that is not the norm. Human nature is such that when you step forward and you ask for help and you step out of a comfort zone, and you request some assistance or guidance or anything, people naturally want to help. And so I found that stepping out of the comfort zone of hiding away, in my case, was led to incredible success. And so I think it's incredibly important. You're not going to grow and change and excel within the comfort zones. A level of discomfort is required to grow and expand and excel in whatever areas you want to excel.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Wendy, I'm also wondering your thoughts on the idea, you mentioned networking earlier, and I truly believe if you want to have success in careers or in business, that life is a constant game of networking. But as you mentioned earlier, not everyone is comfortable with that process, and even on LinkedIn, as you mentioned earlier. So I'm curious to ask you, if you had to create a roadmap to be a successful networker, where would you start and why?
Well, in this world that we're currently in, the place to start is LinkedIn, because especially for people who are a bit shy and introverted, because often, putting yourself in a industry meetup or a conference or something, people tend to be quiet, and the shy ones, especially, and the introverts. And so they may not get what they want out of that because being in crowds of people cause anxiety. And network is about being with people, or at least one other person. You can't network with yourself, right? You've got to network. You and I talking on this podcast is a level of networking. Mm-hmm. We're sharing ideas, we're having conversation. Your audience will get to hear me speak. My audience will get to hear about you when I share, whatever on LinkedIn. And so networking can't happen with yourself. You have to step forward and get connected to at least one other person. But if you're going to build strong networks and you're going to broaden and widen your opportunities, then you need to get very comfortable networking with many people. LinkedIn is fabulous for that now, because you can avoid doing the in-person thing if that really causes you anxiety, and you can start studying LinkedIn profiles, right? So one of the things I teach my clients is go and look at people who are working in companies or jobs that you aspire to be in. So, for example, if you want to work at Microsoft, you go to Microsoft's page on LinkedIn, it's going to list all the people that work there. Take the time and effort, and you don't have to do it for hours and hours. Do 5 or 10 minutes a day and start studying profiles or titles of people that you think, oh, I might want to become a change manager, or I might want to become a CIO, or I might want to become a senior project manager. So you start filtering and find those. And then you look. So one of the ways to connect is not to simply hit the connect button on LinkedIn. You need to study the person's profile and identify what you might have in common with that person. Did they work in similar companies to you? If they share something personal about themselves, for example, they like traveling and you like traveling too, then you find the common ground and you connect with them with a message. So if it's someone that likes traveling, you could, for example, go, hello, John, I noticed that you're a traveler and you're passionate about traveling. So am I. I would love to have you in my network. It's a simple sentence, but you've made a connection based on a common theme that you both have or common ground. And you will find that most people, when you connect with them with a personal message, based on the fact that you've read through their profile and can point to something about their profile, very few people decline that connection. Most of them will accept it. What they will decline is when you just hit the connect button, there's no message, there's nothing to indicate to the person that you even know anything about them, that you've even bothered to read their profile. They're not going to accept that connection. So there's a way to connect on LinkedIn. But as you start to build your connections, especially in the companies that you might be interested in working in, you can start to then do what I did, is pick the brains of those people and say, hey, what's it really like to work at Microsoft? What are the things you love working the most at Microsoft? What are the things that give you the most joy when in a typical day at Microsoft? There are very few people that resist those questions because, as I said, people naturally want to help, and people also like responding to curious, genuine people. So you also need to be genuine. And that's how connections. It is a bit of a long game. It's not a short game. It's a long game because you've got to identify your companies, you've got to figure out your people, and then you start to build your networks. But I can tell you one thing that I've seen happen over and over again. People who do this and do this consistently, they build their connections, they build their networks. And when it comes time for opportunities, those people in those companies already know them because they've built some kind of connection to that person. And I've seen many, many people land their dream jobs just on that strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to end our conversation this way by asking you about the word ambition and how you think ambition can result in career success. And I'm also curious to ask you about your own personal and professional legacy and how you want your legacy to be defined.
So ambition is, for me, it's a motivating factor that has you do what you need to do to be successful. So people who are ambitious will always find a way to get what they want. And that means they're prepared to do all the uncomfortable steps we spoke about, stepping out of the comfort zone, because the ambition is to succeed. I don't think you can succeed without a level of ambition. Sometimes people tend to respond to ambition as a negative, you money driven or you money hungry. And that's not what ambition's about. Ambition is about wanting to be better, wanting to excel in whatever it is that you do, and wanting to do the kind of work that you really feel you can contribute value to. That, I believe, is what ambition is all about. And you need a bit of that. Sometimes you need a lot of that to keep going when times get tough, because, as I said, life is not without challenges. We face that in our personal lives, and we also face it in our professional lives. With regards to my legacy, my big dream as a kid was to be a novelist, because I always knew I loved words. And so I wanted to work with words. I was told as a young kid and as a teenager and a young adult that writing will never pay the bills. So, in many ways, I went back and forth and struggled with that. But what I've done is, my love of words is I've turned it into a tool that I use to help people tell their professional story. So I discovered that I could get a lot of satisfaction by using storytelling and words to elevate people's brands and their resumes and their business copy and so on. So I've gained my satisfaction from words. And I'm still working. I've been working on a novel for probably 10 years now. I don't intend to ever give up. I don't know if it's going to see publishing day because I am a very busy person and I get to write only at sporadic intervals. But the thing is, I'm never going to give up. And I know that. I'm going to be writing until I close my eyes. So I'm doing what I want to do. And so the legacy that I want to leave, and it's one that's driven me to help motivate my daughter, is to never give up. That you are the master of your own destiny. You are the master of your own dreams. And so that's the legacy that I want to leave people. It's not any huge foundation. I mean, some people want to leave buildings and all of this. Mine doesn't come anywhere near that. It's simply about understanding that you deserve what you want. And so you need to become the master of your dreams and never give up. Because you will get what you want if you simply keep going and you simply keep putting one foot in front of the other and taking the small action steps that you need to take every single day to transform whatever area of your life you need to transform, whether it's your health, whether it's your money, whether it's your career, whether it's your relationships.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't give up.
Yeah, absolutely. Wendy, if I want to tell me, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
So my website is happycareerhub.com. That's the best place to find me. And also on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn handle is Wendy A. Alexander.
Well, I have to tell you, Wendy, I certainly enjoyed our extensive conversation about career development, life, and everything in between. I think the work that you're currently doing is transformational, and I want to thank you for providing women a pathway forward to realize and optimize their career ambition and life potential. So I want to thank you for the work that you do and for joining me in conversation this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
Thank you, Kevin. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you.